Hello, my name is Mathijs Slangen. I'm Vice President, Sales and Marketing for Flexport in Europe. And welcome to this forward session. Today, we're going to discuss the topic of going global. What do we mean with that? We see a lot of organizations at the moment focusing with their business models on Europe, but we are highly interested in actually understanding a little bit more what it means if I want to expand outside of Europe. That's the topic for today that what we're going to discuss, and predominantly focusing on that one, on actually expanding business models into the US. I'm not going to do that alone, luckily, so I have three great speakers today with me. And I'm going to introduce them to you right now, and they will give a little bit more introduction about themselves and also about their organizations going forward. So let's start with Karolin Stjerna. Karolin Stjerna is the COO of the Danish fashion brand Ganni. And Ganni is a fashion brand that is represented all over the world and has a massive, let's say, customer base in the US as well. So besides, let's say, their operations in Europe and in other parts of the world, the US has a very dominant spot, I would say, in their overall operating model. So we're very keen and interested to learn more about the experience and about the challenges that Karolin has seen actually when operating in the US. Then next to me here on the couch is Arjan Kuipers. And Arjan Kuipers is currently working for the Holland International Distribution Council. And the Holland International Distribution Council focuses on providing support and advice to companies that either want to come into Europe and the Netherlands specifically, or want to export out of Europe, right? And Arjan's, Arjan's focus in this one is predominantly on the export side. So he will share a little bit more of the findings and a little bit more of the challenges and pitfalls and trends that we see when companies want to explore opportunities elsewhere. Last but not least, we have Joep Verschueren. And Joep Verschueren is a true specialist when it comes to supply chain design and analysis. And he's currently doing that for the company Cordstrap. And Cordstrap is a company focusing on providing services and products that everything has to do with the securing and protection of cargo. It's a very international market. Cordstrap has a large footprint in the US as well for many, many years. So I'm super keen to hear more about Joep's findings, and especially because he has the experience in the US as well as in Europe. So thank you all for joining and welcome. I would like to start with giving a little bit of background around the theme and what we would like to discuss today. Now, as Flexport, just like many other companies, we have been discussing the challenges and the trends out there in the market over the last year extensively with our customers. The market has become extremely complex when you look at the specifically caused also obviously by the global pandemic. And we see a lot of confusion, a lot of, let's say, unforeseen events happening in the market. And every company is actually responding to that a little bit differently. We see on the one hand, we see companies who would like to stick to the core, if you will, and really focus on, I'm going to really make sure that whatever I'm doing right now, I'm going to do that in the best possible way. I'm not going to deviate from it. There's already really a lot of uncertainty out there in the market, so I'm going to stick to the core. That's one of the, let's say, groups that we're seeing. On the other hand, we see a group is very much focused on, there's a lot of volatility out there in the market, and actually I'm going to see if I can seize that moment, right? I'm going to see if I can actually increase my market share. By going into new markets, the market is already very uncertain at the moment, right? So I might as well try and experiment and see if I can actually grow my market share outside of the existing market that I have right now. And that is the area where I'd like to focus on today. And then specifically on European countries who would like to expand into a market like the US. Now, the US is obviously a very interesting market. from a size perspective, from a customer, let's say, buying behavior perspective, there's a lot of similarities between Europe and the US. It's also a very competitive market, obviously. So if you want to crack that code, you have to make sure that you truly understand the challenges and the differences in those markets. And that's specifically what I would like to discuss also with you today, right? Does it, for instance, make sense to replicate your business model that you have in Europe and just try to see if you can do the same thing in the US? Or should you consider the US as a completely new market and maybe focus on it as if you're starting a new business there, right? So I'd like to understand a little bit how you feel and think about this. So maybe Arjan, let's start with you. Why is the US an interesting market? Is that and maybe related to that, do you see an increased interest by companies in actually expanding into the US?
Yeah, thank you first of all, Mathijs, for spending some time with you today. Having lived and worked many places over the world, including the US, but that was 10 years plus ago on the West Coast, and having been in public-private working fields in a commercial role in business development strategy, I think I constantly see an interest in the US, and these days that has absolutely not diminished. And I would say the US, Germany, China, from a Dutch perspective, entrepreneurial setting is constantly on top of their minds. And that's also strongly being supported by Dutch trade missions, bilateral instruments available. So yes, the US is on top of list of many entrepreneurs and government authorities, I would say so.
All right. So that market is extremely interesting, obviously. What kind of pitfalls or challenges do you see when companies wish to expand their business models into the US?
Well, in your introduction, you mentioned, right, the US, it is a totally different ballgame. It's not just another Europe or a bigger Europe or whatsoever.
Yeah.
You mentioned the sheer market size, the per capita wealth creation. I can go on and go on and go on. I mean, the US is on top of many lists in the ease of doing business, in R&D spending, in the ability to attract talent. So yes, the potential is there. But coming back to your questions, the pitfalls are also there. I mean, it's a hugely fragmented world. It's a totally different ballgame, like I said. You should be sure that your language resonates well. So I think two things which immediately come to mind is make sure there is a good product market fit, and your go-to-market strategy is in place. So please do your homework up front in order to end in the wastebasket perhaps later on.
Yeah. Okay. And so it's highly fragmented. Do you see a specific interest in specific areas in the US? Is that related to specific segments or industries?
Yeah, I think I've lived on the West Coast in the US and in San Francisco, and that was 10 years ago, and I was mesmerized by the entrepreneurship, and everybody wanted to create the next big thing. Yeah, so that's really focusing over there. If you go back to the East, areas like Boston, there's a lot of research done over there, huge universities, and it's more in support of the ongoing business, I would say so. Then you also have places like Miami, which is a bit more focused on Latin American markets and perhaps more on the maritime and aviation sector. Yeah. But I would say there is in US markets, what I hear from the business community these days, lots of going on in sectors like fintech, logistics and supply chain, cybersecurity. Those kind of things. But also there are themes like sustainability, circular economy is coming to mind. I've just been working with some companies who are looking at the West Coast on mobility, electric vehicles and those kind of things where lots of things are happening. So yes, so be aware, I would say, right? I mean, choose your point of entry. Like I said, it's fragmented. Choose a landing spot where you make sure that the cost of doing business fits your wallet. You're close to your customers. Logistics is fit for purpose, and then and build your business from there.
Got it. So understanding your market, that's probably what every company needs to do. So, but where do you start in terms of getting resources or, like finding the additional experts? Do you have any?
I think, well, first of all, there is a lot of availability of information in the public domain, on the internet, et cetera, et cetera. I think also there, if it's, I'm not sure if for your company it's the first time you enter a new market, but if you have already customers there, also perhaps you can leverage your relationship with already existing European customers who have a presence in the US.
Okay.
I mean, there's of course great connectivity between Europe and the US. So traveling there, even in these days, it is possible. And of course, collecting data in making the feasibility study, let's say. So it is, you have partners in place also over there. For instance, as for HIDC, Holland International Distribution Council, the organization I work for, we work with partners cross over the US. Atlanta Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce, we work with Miami, we work in LA Greater Council, who have a lot of data available. They can help you in getting in contact with local partners, either could be law firms, tax firms, whatever. So don't be afraid to reach out to for certain partners.
Yeah. Okay. So the statement of make sure you seek support and is you would definitely echo that statement.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think do so. I think it's important to find partners in whichever phase of your journey you are. And I think the reason also for doing that, you want to be able to show that you're to hit the ball out of the park. You want to have a quick win, because it's a very competitive market.
Okay.
And like you said also in your earlier statement, you can't do everything perhaps by yourself. So stick to your core. What is it you want to focus on your customer, what drives him, and anything else, the waste perhaps, please find partners who are perhaps more capable of handling these things.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So quick wins are important in that one.
I think so, because you don't perhaps have too deep pockets, but be able to show that you are competitive, eager to win, and drive the business forward.
Yeah. Okay, we as Flexport can very much relate to that indeed as well. Okay, no, thanks for that. Super interesting, Arjan. I would like to go to you, Karolin. I gave a very short introduction about Ganni, but why is the US market so interesting for you, or how important is it for you actually as Ganni?
I mean, it's a very important market. It's one of our key markets. And of course, why it's so interesting, we can see it has a massive potential for us. It's US for us is still relatively a new market, where we started to sell to our wholesale partners in 2017. We opened our e-com on 2018, and then we opened our first stores in 2019. Yeah. So even though it's a key market already, it's still we're still in the starting phase of our journey, as we see it.
Yeah. Okay. And if you would compare, let's say, the European customer to the US customer, right? So there's some would argue, the customers are more or less the same, but I think there's quite a bit of difference there as well, right? Would you agree? Do you see a big difference there?
Yes, we do. I think in general what we see is that US customers are expecting a higher service. They are also, less understanding for disruptions. So, even though we have a global pandemic or shipping delays or flooding in New York, the customers still expect us to work around it and find solutions. While I think the European customer is more in general a bit more understanding on the situation.
So you even have to be more nimble, more adaptive in the US than in Europe, specifically if you don't want to lose the customers that you want in the beginning. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. We also see that I mean, it's also a very competitive market, as you say. So the customers are not willing to take up extra costs for shipping, etc. So they rather than seek somewhere else. So less understanding of that part as well.
Okay, going a little bit more deeper into, let's say, the distribution or logistics elements there. From an inventory planning perspective, right? The differences in let's say, customer requirements. Does that influence, let's say, how you look at inventory planning?
I mean, we do in Ganni. We have the same collections, and we have the same global launch dates. And looking at the planning cycle, we also do have, this typical sell-in phases with your wholesale partners are also the same. The challenge for us is of course the lead time. The majority of our production is in Asia or in Europe, so it's far away to US from all production sites. So we are of course have long lead time, longer costs. So, but we have the same sort of cycle. So it requires a lot from our planning team to work on forecasting and anticipation and work on material bookings, etc. Whatever we can do to be a little bit more beforehand for the US market to be able to deliver them in time.
Got it. That's also a little bit, Arjan, what you mentioned about the data, right? So making sure that you have the right data at hand to make those decisions and make those decisions very fast.
Yeah,
it's important to be adaptive. Okay. If you look at Europe and the US, right, both markets are suffering quite badly, I would say, from supply chain disruptions at the moment, like actually the rest of the world as well. Do you see differences there? Is it for you even worse in the US than in Europe, or how do you see that?
I mean, I think the challenges we see are very much alike. So, delays, shortages of materials, delays in production, longer lead times in shipping, capacity constraints. So we see that the same in US and in Europe. However, as mentioned, because of us having a lot of production within Europe, for example, and also the shipment method from Asia to Europe is a lot more flexible. So we have more tools, you could say, to catch up with the delays for a European market. While for US, we are more challenged because of the longer lead time and the cost. And, you have the sea shipments or you have the air in such. But, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Hey, and based on the learnings, or at least like the experience that you have right now, is there anything else that you say, like, hey, if you are going to consider expanding into the US, what should I take into account?
I mean, I will copy very much what Arjan was saying as well. I mean, I think it's important to do your research before entering. I would not recommend to just copy paste what you do in Europe. So rather do your investigation and find the right partners to work with. And I think it comes for, all the package from go-to-market strategy, but also very much for the logistics. So finding the right partner for that market is also important, so they understand the customers and the needs. At least that's a learning. We have been expanding to different places, also Asia, China recently, and at least from our perspective, we have found out that it works best for us to find the best local partners in the area for warehousing, customs, and transportation, etc.
Yeah. Is that something, Arjan, that you see as well? Really focusing on local expertise, so diversifying your partner.
Yeah. I think also there, what I've seen with companies who are looking at the US market, they do a bit of A and B testing, right? It should be like I told you, if you talk about LA, Boston, or Miami, those they pick 2 out of 3, and they test the market over there, and in order to find the right landing spot. Which and also I really like the statement about service. Right, I mean the service levels it's enormous. It's much higher, perhaps. I fully echo the statements being made over there. And I think also the companies, the European companies, you don't want to be on a transactional basis, right? You want to really be a partner towards your customer over there. I mean, you just don't want to be another vendor which is competitive on price. You want to add value into the process.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Hey, Arjan, you mentioned sustainability as well. I know, Karolin, for you, and I think Ganni is really a front runner, I would say, when it comes down to sustainability. Is there a difference you see in perception or how the US market or the European market or the customer is looking at sustainability?
Yes, I think we see some differences. Not in terms of how focused you are, but more on what you're focused on your sort of sustainability interests. So we can see, for example, that in Scandinavia, a lot of focus is on the material and getting new, more responsible materials to work with. While, for example, in UK, it's a lot about technology, rental service, secondhand, and US has been focusing a lot on responsible packaging, for example, even though we see that also the secondhand and rental is coming strongly in US as well. So we see some differences, while Ganni still, we take like a global approach to sustainability. So we don't, we handle it from the headquarter and we make a strategy that globally. But then, of course, we can adapt and try with some partners certain things in local markets.
Right. Interesting. So, but you do recognize there's differences in let's say opinions or how people look at sustainability. But you decide, or at least your decision is to go for a global sustainability strategy with small customizations in the local market, right?
Yes.
Interesting.
I mean, we have been testing some things, and I think still when it comes to cost again, there is a high interest on sustainability from the end consumer, but we are still not wanted to pay for an extra packaging, etc. So I think it has to come from within the company that you really want to make a difference. So it's important for us to take a global stand and do what we feel is right, and then eventually we hope that the consumer will also, follow us.
Yeah. All right. I would like to talk a little bit about, let's say, how important it is to sit very close to your end consumer, and maybe Joep, you can also share a little bit more on that one. But before we go there, Joep, can you share with us from Cordstrap perspective how important is the US market for your business?
US is are one of our prime markets, and although we've started in Europe, US is definitely a big market for us. Currently not having production there anymore since a few years, so that brings its own challenges to the US market, where we don't have, or the challenges in Europe are smaller from a supply chain perspective. As Karolina said, having production in the Middle East, in Dubai, and in the Netherlands, lead times really affect US market more than our European one at the moment, where we have options to supply European customers in a few days in certain situations. Obviously, you have to consider lead times to the US a lot more, especially with the current disruptions. Supplies are difficult to plan, and therefore the challenges are bigger. So what we've seen is that a good S&OP process, aligning our commercial teams with our supply chain teams, connecting them stronger, helps us really to ensure we serve our customers.
Right. Hey, and if you talk about lead times, because you're not producing in the US, are you talking about the lead times to get your products into the US, or also the distribution within the US to the final customer?
So the main lead times are getting our product into the US, talking about ocean transportation mainly. Those are the real lead times that we have to consider. Since we keep stock in all locations in the US, the lead times from those stock keeping facilities or the warehouses to customers are fairly minimal, let's say, compared to the ocean freight. So we're talking 1, 2, 3 days maybe, as where if you wouldn't keep stock, that would be multiple months, which is definitely not acceptable to our customers.
Yes. talking about that acceptance of these customers, right? I think Karolin mentioned that a little bit as well. You know, like US customers seem to be a little bit less forgiving, I would say. Do you experience that same thing? Do you need to be closer on the ball in the US than you need to be in Europe, or?
I've seen certain situations during my time in the US, yes, where customers can be quite demanding when it comes to having the product available without, let's say, too much commitment. So the expectations could be higher, and how we deal with that in certain cases is we have a certain product group that is really customer specific in some cases, where we need to have one last activity in our production process. What we did is our old let's say where we had our production facility, we keep some of those activities local to keep that customer order decoupling point very close to the customer. So we are flexible to still serve those customers based on last minute demand, because it's very difficult to forecast those product groups. That is one way we deal with that. So part of it is still produced in Europe, but some of the last step is done close to the customer, so we can decide last minute how we schedule that production and get it to the customer in a few days.
Interesting. So if you're mentioning like being close to the customer is extremely important.
Yes.
If you wish to continue to do that, you probably need to expand your network quite heavily, right?
Expanding our network, as in our supply chain network.
Yeah.
Yes and no. You want to be close to your customer from your, let's say, your warehouse where you keep your stock. That doesn't mean though that you want unlimited number of warehouses, both from a cost perspective, but also from an optimal service level. The less places you keep your stock, the easier it is to have the right stock in the right place. So that's really a balance between, hey, how close do I want to be to my customer, and how long does it take to serve that customer, to having an optimal inbound process as well. If you have too many warehouses that keep only very limited stock, from an inbound perspective, you get new challenges like not being able to serve with full container loads, being dependable on LCL, for example, which makes supply chain even more difficult to plan. And at the end of the day, you will not be able to plan for those demands in the US region.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. So if we would be able, because we have more visibility on that end-to-end supply chain and of all of the players in that supply chain, meaning that we have more control over the LCL planning, that could actually be an interesting angle to see if you can tackle, let's say, the challenges in the market from that perspective. Would you agree?
Yeah, so in some cases in LCL, so for us that's not too relevant, but what we do see on LCL is that lead times are even longer than with full container loads at the moment, or always has been, and obviously also a cost impact there. But having those full container loads and regular schedules in which you can supply your stock keeping facilities really helps us in making our inbound plannable,
right,
and therefore forecastable as well. And that helps us, let's see, helps us keep that impact of long lead times small.
Yeah, understood. Hey, you mentioned that you don't have a production facility in the US anymore. I guess right now, with all of the challenges, sometimes I guess you wish that you had a production facility. I would say, but I don't think you're considering to.
Yeah, honestly, that's a bit above my pay grade to make those decisions.
Of course.
But I understand very well that companies would be considering options like producing closer to home, let's say, whether that's Europe or the US, and even sourcing materials this could be a right moment for companies to consider that, instead of where many companies, I can say, source mainly from the East, so from China and countries close by. I've heard multiple people in my social life and also professionally considering those options to source more in Europe, for example, as a China. That in combination, obviously, also with the geopolitical stress sometimes that shows up. Those could be factors to consider, definitely.
Yeah. And this is, I would echo that, Joep. We see when we're talking to a lot of our customers, specifically who are importing into Europe, they're definitely considering different production facilities a little bit more nearby. Depends on the industry whether you can actually do that. Arjan, do you see that as well for companies that are currently exploring opportunities in the US, that they're like, hey, probably we also want to look at production facilities which are a little bit closer to home, maybe in the US or Mexico or any other location?
Customer experience, reshoring, all those items, sustainability we discussed, they are looking at all, they take it all into consideration to see how they can optimize it.
But if I listen to you, Karolin and Joep, you're predominantly focusing not so much on producing or in the US, but more on let's say, optimizing your supply chain so that the lead times are going to be as short as possible. That's currently, I would say, from a supply chain perspective, your strategy, right? So by using most data and really that end-to-end visibility, is that correct?
Yeah, yes, that's correct. So at this time, we are not looking into having production in US, but I mean, things can change, and we also need to have this sort of agile approach to things. But currently, we will remain spread by Europe and Asia. We have found it quite good, especially during this pandemic, that we are spread around the world, because when we had challenges in Europe, the Asia or China production worked well, etc. So it's about spreading the risks as well. And we have a China organization as well, or a market as well. So it's good for us to be spread out.
Fair enough. Okay. And I think you just answered that already a little bit. I think
to add to that, spreading risk, it's a good one. We have multiple warehouses in the US where we keep stock, and that also helps us spread that risk when it comes to supply chain congestions. For example, the West Coast is impacted a lot more than the East Coast by port congestions, etc. So that having inventory available in the East Coast helps us support, let's say, that West Coast in cases of urgency. So that also decreases our risk of stockouts very practically.
Did you drastically increase, let's say, did this risk spreading network, if you will?
We did our main analysis and our changes we made actually right before the disruptions started. So after that, we didn't really look at our network necessarily anymore, but we did take more actions that might sometimes not be the most cost efficient, but we do take actions to keep the inventories, the stocks close to our customers by also domestic transportation from one to another location. So mitigating that risk has been one of the main, has got more attention than it ever needed. Yes.
Got it. Hey, and you maybe another question. If you look at designing your supply chain or designing your model that you want to look at, and I believe that you spend a considerable amount of time of actually looking at how to do that in Europe as well as in the US. What are the specific elements or variables that you're looking at when you're doing that?
There are multiple factors. One is, we've mentioned it a few times already, is being close to that customer, having your service levels, and that's lead times to customers, but also having the right available product. So both that S&OP process obviously is important for having the right product, but looking at that distribution network, where do our warehouses need to be? So a center of gravity study, for example, I'm really focusing on where are our customers. And for us, looking at our product, it makes sense that a lot of our customers are located in, let's say, industrial heavy areas, and also port, of course, because our customers ship product. That's what our product is for. So it makes sense for us to also be located in those locations. So those are factors, and obviously you don't want, as I mentioned, too many places where you keep stock either. So from that perspective, is also a good balance between that service level, but also making sure your inbound is plannable, your stock levels are optimal, etc. So that's really a balance between the two.
Got it. Hey, how often do you actually? I think Karolin, you mentioned it as well. You need to be prepared for the things that are. You need to be prepared for the unprepared, maybe, right? For the things that you don't know that are going to happen. How often do you revise or look at your supply chain model and think like, hey, do I need to change this again?
We do it, I mean, constantly, I would say. I mean, we are with Ganni in a very high growth pace. Yeah. So we need to look constantly to adapt to the new needs of the business. So it's, I mean, we did now a 5-year plan on the supply chain strategy, but I'm sure we will, continue to change it every year or every half year. So we're constantly adapting or learning, I would say, as well. Yeah.
Okay. So. And you take into account the different scenarios or the potential scenarios that might occur, right? I would say.
Exactly. So we do a lot of scenarios building. We're also looking, of course, on where we expect to grow in the future, where it makes sense to place your warehouses. We're also looking, on the whole Omni setup, and where can you use your stores as meaningful fulfillment centers to also optimize the customer experience, and evaluating the supplier base. So I think because we are this young company, we are still learning and growing and have to adapt all the time to new needs.
Yes. But you're approaching it globally, right? I mean, you adjust your strategy to the local markets, to the US or to Europe, but you try to, I assume, learn as much as possible from what works well in the different markets.
Yeah, exactly. So we approach it globally, but just as you say, but working locally with the right partners to best insights. Yeah.
Hey, from those partners' perspective, Joep, how are you? Do you have some sort of a partner diversification strategy there as well? Would you like to work with really local partners, or would you prefer a partner that has a little bit more of an overarching US span of control? How do you look at that?
When it comes to our local partners in logistics, on one hand, you do want the less suppliers you have or the less partners you have, the easier it is to manage that. So our warehouses in the US, for example, are all managed by the same company. That helps us a lot in optimizing that. But you also want your local heroes. Looking at distribution, for example, there are, especially in the US, partners that are very good on the East Coast are not even represented in the West Coast, for example. So you need to be a bit more flexible there and look for your local heroes. And having people on the ground knowing that business helps us a lot. Having to do that from the Netherlands, not knowing really the logistical network in the US, that would be very complicated, and we would not be able to do such a good job as our US colleagues on the ground.
Right. Is that your advice as well, Arjan, to look at these local heroes?
Yeah, think global, act local. I think that's the main device, and you need to have a local footprint who has a thorough understanding of all the rules and regulations in place, and you cannot do that out of your office somewhere in the south of the Netherlands, I would say.
That's probably very much in line what we are doing as Flexport as well, right? So we are actually making sure that we have the right partners everywhere to actually support our business. Yeah. The key thing there is, how do you make sure that those partners are all operating on the desired level that you really want, right? So that you have some sort of control over those partners and that you can really work together, right? I think that's pretty crucial here. You cannot switch partners all the time, because then I guess you lose a little bit the control over your whole supply chain. And having that data from these partners is, I think, crucial. Is this what you take into account when you're selecting partners as well, Karolin, maybe, or you?
Yes. When looking at partners, I mean, it's as you say, it's very difficult to switch partners a lot. So going into it, trying to find a really a good partner that you can work with long term, and that where you can also see that you can expand with in different areas. For example, for us in US, we have, in looking at the warehouse, we have a partner over there that we know have other warehouses, on the now we are on the East Coast, but we could expand to the West Coast, Canada, etc. So already from the start, we have considered that this is a partner that we could grow with, for example. And then, of course, it's about, again, doing your research and talk to other people in the same industry, and hopefully you do the right choice on the partner. But yeah.
Joep, you would echo that?
Yes, definitely. And what helps us a lot is using also our partners that maybe used to be seen as just transporters or suppliers. We really, what we've been focusing on really is making that a partnership more so than before, using their experience as well on market updates, for example. How is that global ocean situation going on a regular basis? So we can also adapt on that, and that helps us in really to our operational planning, even in example, LA is congested 2 weeks. That's going to be you can expect a delay there. We use that information from our partners and plan for that going forward, and regular reviews of that market at the moment is really important, and not having that expertise at the company necessarily makes us focus on that cooperation with partners. So regular market updates, also these round tables, for example, really help us understand the supply chain situation at the moment.
Yeah. Hey, and I think that's not really massively different from how you approach it in Europe as well, right? I think in Europe you also look at local partners, I would say.
That's global indeed. So that's not region specific. No.
Okay. Hey, last question for you, Joep. I asked that to Karolin as well. If you look at the learnings and the experience that you have in the US, and if I'm a company and I would like to now go to the US, expect from all the elements that we already mentioned about making sure that you do your research, right, and really think about how your distribution model would look like. Is there anything else that you would say, like, I would sincerely take this into account when I'm moving into that market?
Well, although I'm not really experienced in that field, what I would want to, what I agree with Arjan said is really using your expertise locally and using those local heroes. You can't do everything yourself. And although US and Europe, we seem maybe culturally very similar, there are still differences. And also looking at the supply chain environment, you are going to need help. So don't expect to do everything yourself.
Yes.
And don't be afraid to hire professionals that know what they're doing on the ground.
Yes, very valid, very valid. Arjan, any last recommendations from your side, besides from the topics that we discussed already?
I think we discussed the partner selection. I think also over there, when looking at HIDC, we do it, let's say, from the outside to the inside. We can help, in this case, US companies who are looking to outsource perhaps their logistics in the Netherlands, and we can provide them a matchmaking with companies in the Netherlands who can help them. But also we can work the other side around. So if there are startups companies, we do that specifically for Dutch companies, I would say.
Yeah.
But if there are Dutch companies out there who are looking to exploit supply chain optimization and looking for partners, that's something we can help with. So that's, I think, a very hands-on advice, and we can build on years on experience over there, and we can also create learning points from other companies here in the Netherlands too. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us on this.
Very good, very good. Okay, hey, so let's try to see if we can summarize or wrap this up a little bit as some of the learnings, or at least what I'm hearing here. I think one of the most important ones, or one of the biggest pitfalls that you can make, is if you would treat the US market in exactly the same way as you would do in Europe. So you're just replicating whatever your model is and extend that to the US market. It seems, if I listen also to your input and what we are discussing with other customers as well, is that you really have to make sure that you treat it as a different market and almost start from scratch with designing how you would operate in that market. You all are echoing that having those local partners is extremely important, right? The local heroes where you can work with. But at the same time, making sure that you keep control over your supply chain, right? So that you still have that visibility of what all your partners are doing. You're all mentioning the, let's say, the importance of having high service levels, right? Making, and probably even more than in Europe, I would say. So making sure that you have those lead times 100% under control, even if they are longer, because I think they are longer in many cases, also in your cases. You can work and plan for that as long as you have full control over that. In order to do that, having that full end-to-end supply chain visibility, where you really see for all of those partners or all of the elements in the supply chain, what's going on, and using that data to, as you're saying, to be agile and adaptive, I think is an extremely important part there. Last but not least, it remains very much the case that the US is still 100% an extremely interesting market, interesting growth market, to keep on focusing on. And I think that you're also all agreeing to that statement. So thank you very much for your input, for sharing this with us. That was very much appreciated. I learned a lot. I hope you had some interesting insights from each other as well, and I'm pretty certain that the rest of the audience also appreciated the sharings that we've done here. So thank you so much. I hope to see you soon again, also in real life again. Thank you.